Alright, so yesterday sucked. Now that we got that out the way, welcome back to the channel. We've got our daily college basketball best bets here for Wednesday, February 26th. We've got some good games today in college basketball. I, for one, will not be talking about a lot of those good games because the value today are in the bad games in college basketball. Now, there are some good games that we're going to be talking about, like the ones you see on the screen right now. I mean, I guess SMU and Cal is kind of a good game today, but we see the value today in some, again, lower level games, and we'll get to that and more in just a few minutes here, folks. But before we get into the best bets, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below for some more daily college basketball best bets here on the channel. Later today, in a couple hours, we're going to be posting our NBA predictions, 9 games today in the National Basketball Association, so make sure to check us out over there later today on the channel. And also, our UFC Fight Night Cop versus Almabayev predictions were posted last Sunday, so make sure to check that video out. It is the final MMA video here on the Greedo Plays channel because we are officially moving to Greedo Plays MMA starting next Sunday with the fight, or the UFC 313 card, between Alex Pereira and Magomed Ankalaev in the main event. Make sure to subscribe on Greedo Plays MMA. That is the first link in the description down below. All right, on to the first of our 5 best bets today for college basketball, and we start off in the Atlantic Coast Conference. Again, I did say earlier, some lower level games. I mean, again, this is still an ACC game, but at the same time as this game today, obviously Ole Miss is playing Auburn, Vandy's playing A&M, Notre Dame's going to Clemson, and here we are picking an NC State Syracuse game. Again, I think for the value and for the price that we get it at, it is the best line of the early slate, at least the 4 o'clock slate. Now, I don't, again, specifically look at, times and say, all right, need to have a game for 4, but this is the first best bet I could find for today. We do like Syracuse at home. I get it. Syracuse has been ice cold, but they're a much better team at home than they are on the road, right? Yeah, they lost to Miami on the road. They lost to Pitt on the road. But when they're at home, they play competitive ball against UNC. They beat Boston College at home prior to that. Somehow they went to Cal and won. That's an odd one. Again, we will get to the Golden Bears at the end of this video, obviously. But again, Syracuse is beating the teams they're supposed to beat at home all year long, right? All the low-level teams in the ACC, Syracuse beats when they have to come up to upstate New York. Georgia Tech, not actually a low-level team, but they beat Georgia Tech at home this season. They beat Boston College twice. They get Pitt, or no, not they play UNC close at home, and then Notre Dame's the team I was looking for that they beat at home. Again, they didn't get Miami at home this season, obviously with the expanded ACC, thanks to Cal and Stanford, but they get NC State now at home. And North Carolina State 4-12 this year in the ACC. Syracuse 5-11. Again, the Oranges 5 wins. BC twice. Notre Dame, California, and then a victory over Georgia Tech again at home in Syracuse. Now, again, the Orange are nothing special. I'm not going to pretend like they are again, right? Eddie Lampkin, obviously the Colorado transfer, has been pretty good this season. JJ Starling has been, they're pretty much their best scorer all year long. He scored, I believe, 14 points in the Pitt game, which was an off night for him. But prior to that, 28 against BC in the triple overtime victory, 25 in the loss to Miami, which sucks, yes, but different game. They go on the road, right? It is what it is. They get this game in Syracuse. They make North Carolina State come up from Raleigh to play them. Starling again with 25 in the Miami victory, Miami loss, 22 in the loss to UNC. Again, Starling's the best guy for Syracuse. You add on top of that Eddie Lampkin, who will have his nights. Again, Lampkin in the UNC game, 26-11. Obviously, he was a big star last year for the Colorado Buffaloes, playing on that very talented team that had the likes of, again, Cody Williams on that squad, same team that beat Florida in the first round of the NCAA tournament last year. Lampkin hasn't had that same impact, obviously, for the Orange like he did last year for the Buffs, but he is still a very decent center for this basketball team, and hopefully he gives us a better performance than what we got out of, a guy that we mentioned yesterday in Peyton Sparks. Shout out to the Ball State Cardinals who play in Ball, Indiana. I'm joking. Muncie, Indiana. Anyways, the Syracuse Orange are taking on NC State in this game, right? North Carolina State went on a huge losing streak. They've won 2 of 3 going into this game, but we got to think about who they're playing. Now, the Wake Forest win, great win. I'll give them that. That's a really good victory for this team. Prior to that, though, a win or loss at UNC, and then a win over Boston College. Again, NC State, though, has not gone on the road yet and won in the ACC this season. They haven't. They have not won a road game all year long, actually. They are winless on the road, and just because they're playing Syracuse this week, I don't think that changes the fact that they can't win on the road. They lose to Virginia on the road, VTech on the road, Duke, Cal, Stanford, North Carolina. Sure, they play competitive ball, But again, this is nowhere near the team they were last year. Obviously, the Final Four team with DJ Burns and company. Again, NC State, I've said it all the time. I mean, this was my favorite team to watch last season in the tourney. They're just not the same team. It's nothing close. And sure, again, right now, it was a little bit, that was about right. They were ice cold going into the ACC tourney last year. They were, an 11 seed in that tournament, and somehow they won out. So I'm not going to say again, oh, this is the time last year where they caught fire, because I believe they went into the ACC tourney last year off a loss, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, they had lost 4 straight games going in the ACC tourney, and they swept the tournament, obviously, and got away to the Final Four. That team was something special, man. Yeah, that Wolfpack team was crazy. Again, I would like to say NC State's going to do that again this season, but they're not. They're nowhere close. They don't have the potential that they had last year. Again, they had guys last year. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, oh, I saw it coming from NC State. Obviously, no one saw that run coming. But they had guys last year. Again, DJ Horn was an absolute baller for this team. Obviously, DJ Burns. Casey Morrell was really good. Mohamed Diarra played really good minutes for that team last year. They brought back Ben Middlebrooks, but they're nowhere near what they were last season. I think Syracuse is able to win this one. I think we see a big game out of JJ Starling. Again, I expect him to have a night for the Orange, and I do expect them to win this game at home. Again, Syracuse has been decent in home spots this season, and again, the Wolfpack have not won away from Raleigh this season. I don't think they get there first this late in the year. Give me the Syracuse Orange at home, -120 on the money line to beat the NC State Wolfpack. We go on to our second best bet of the video. Okay, this is such a confusing line. It really is. Now again, normally when you get confusing ass lines like this, something's up. But we move now to a spot in the Missouri Valley between the Belmont Bruins and the Missouri State Bears. Belmont is only a 1.5 point favorite against Missouri, who is 2-16 in the MVC. I get it, Belmont's kind of stuck at 4 for the MVC tourney. I think they are completely stuck at 4, I think. No, they could theoretically drop down because I think UIC could take their spot, I think. But it's not like Belmont's not going to try to win this game, though, right? It's not like they're going to completely rest their guys for the Missouri Valley tourney. If this was their last game in the regular season, I would think that they still have to play on Sunday against Murray State. So if they're going to rest guys, it's going to come in that game. They're not going to lay down for Missouri State here. Again, a horrible team in the Missouri Valley Conference. Everything points to a Belmont victory. Regardless if, again, they do let up some, they should still beat Missouri State. Guys, this Missouri State team, the first time around they played Belmont, lost the game by 17 points. Missouri State's won 2 games all year long in the Missouri Valley Conference, and they come at home, both of them. A good win over Murray State, and then a win over Evansville. But coming into this game, they're on a 3-game losing streak, losing to UIC on the road, losing to Valpo on the road, and losing to Illinois State at home. Again, all those games are competitive. The UIC loss was by 5, the Valpo loss on the road was by 2, and the Illinois State loss was by 2 as well. Guys, Belmont is better than all those teams. They just are. They're better than UIC, they're definitely better than Valparaiso, and they're better than Illinois State too. Illinois State's probably the best up now. UIC's probably better than, UIC's probably better than Illinois State, but regardless, Belmont's the best team out that bunch. So I'm not going to say, and I don't think, again, I think the reason for why the odds are close is, Missouri State's due because of the results that they've been seeing. But don't forget, Belmont was a pretty hyped up team going into MVC play this year. They've just really struggled recently. Again, they lost that game out at Illinois State. They lose to Evansville, lose to Valpo, lose to Northern Iowa. And again, the last time we took the Bruins, they went to Valpo and lost and let Valpo score 101 points on them. Since then, they've won 2 of 3, with their only loss being UNI. But again, if that Northern Iowa Drake game the other night proved anything, is that, all right, Northern Iowa's right there with Drake. And sure, Bradley's right there too, obviously with Bradley's victory over Drake 2 weekends ago. But those are the top 3 squads in the MVC. And yes, I would put the Bruins currently at number 4 behind Drake, Bradley, and Northern Iowa. But they're not going to lose to Missouri State. And sure, again, Belmont's likely stuck to the 4 seed in the Missouri Valley tourney, but it's not like they're not going to try to win. They're not going to lay down for this team. I think they get it, and I think they get this one pretty easily. We like this squad with Jonathan Pierre, Carter Witt, they're just better than Missouri State, and that goes without saying. So as long as we don't see some tricky dicky shenanigans, yeah, the Belmont Bruins should be able to take this game fairly easily, right? Missouri State led by Des White, who averages 14 points a night. Vincent Brady II will give you 13.5 for Missouri State. But on paper, again, Belmont's just the way better basketball team. The first time around when this game was played at Belmont, the Bruins won by 15. Missouri State's won 2 games all year long in the Missouri Valley. They don't really score. And the problem sometimes with Belmont, like in the Valpo game, they don't play the best defense, but it's not like Missouri State's gonna be the team to exploit that. Even in their 2 victories this season, 77 points against Murray State, all right, but that's nothing Belmont can't put up. And then 71 in the win over Evansville. This team has so many low scoring nights. Their second game in the Missouri Valley this season was a 57-40 loss to Evansville. Evansville's awful. 51 points in a game against Southern Illinois. I mean, they just don't score that much. When they played a D2 Lincoln, Missouri in December, they scored 61 points. They're not a high-scoring team. You have to be a high-scoring team to beat Belmont. And I think the Bruins get them fairly easily here. -1.5 or the money line. Don't care which one you take. I think they're both playable. Give me the Belmont Bruins to go on the road to Missouri State and to take down the Missouri State Bears. We go on to our third best bet of the video. And we go to Chicago, Illinois, for the Loyola Chicago Ramblers and the George Washington Revolutionaries. I don't think, full transparency, I don't think we've ever gotten a George Washington game right yet this year. I think we're 0-3, regardless if we pick the Revolutionaries or not. So let's try to break that right here. Give me Loyola Chicago at home -3.5. I've come around on the Ramblers. Obviously, earlier in the year, they were very disappointing, and the peak of the disappointment, obviously, was that Hawaii tournament where, those were the only games on at the time, so we predicted or we did best bets for every single one of those Maui Invitational games or Honolulu Invitational games, and they got swept, losing to Oakland, Charleston, and Murray State in back-to-back days. And this team, really struggled to kick off A-10 play, but they have been playing fairly good ball recently. You look what they've done in their last 7, winning 6 out of 7 games going into this one, right? That starts on February 1st, beating St. Joseph's, then beating the Bonnies. They go to Duquesne, lose, but then 4 straight wins at Richmond, winning that one, beating St. Louis, beating Davidson on the road, and then beating Dayton in their last game by 4 points. Loyola Chicago has continued to find ways to win. I've come around in the squad again earlier in the year. I said, after Loyola Chicago was completely laying eggs over in Hawaii, I was like, we're done with Loyola Chicago. Well, here, this is their second chance. Des Watson and Jaden Dawson are their 2 scorers. Both these guys average 13 points a night. Sheldon Edwards, again, to start the year, was primarily their main scorer. He still averages 12 points a game, and their big is Miles Rubin, who will give you 9 and 5 a night. I just think they're way better than George Washington, especially with the game being in Chicago. George Washington, a very off-and-on squad. They have traded wins and losses dating all the way back to February 5th, where they lost to George Mason by 3 points. They go to St. Bonnie's after that. They win. They lost to VCU, then proceeded to actually pick up a good win and go to Davidson and win that one. Lost to St. Joseph's at home, and obviously on Saturday, they beat UMass. All right, is what it is. They blew UMass out by 22 points. Do I think they now go on the road and put together back-to-back great performances and now against Loyola Chicago? I don't think so. Earlier in the year, it was Gerald Drumagul who was really their primary scorer. He was the guy, I remember when we picked them, we were talking about George Washington basketball in December and whatnot. Drumagul was the guy for them. He has, again, kind of expectedly at this point, obviously, since his poor performances in December and January, has, kind of fallen off. He's only averaging 11 points a game. Rafael Castro is the guy for George Washington. It's not even close. Castro averaging 13.5 points and 9 boards a game. You also add in, again, Darren Buchanan Jr., who averages 12. And again, Drumagul is not a bad player either, still averaging 11 points a game. Trey Autry averages 10. He's one of their guards as well alongside Drumagul. But again, Rafael Castro is the main player for this George Washington team. But I just think it's a tough spot for the Revolutionaries going on the road to Loyola. Loyola Chicago's been on a run recently, again, winning 6 out of 7 games, and they've covered this line in every single win that they've gotten in that win streak, with the exception of the victory against St. Joseph's. So all their victories recently, again, they've covered the 3.5 point line. Dayton, they beat by 4. St. Louis, they beat by 9. I think Loyola Chicago, again, is just the better basketball team. They should be able to get George Washington. We've seen George Washington struggle on the road time in and time out this season. And I think we should be okay. Again, early in A10 play, they really struggled on the road, losing at George Mason, losing at UMass. They lost at Richmond on New Year's Eve. Again, that's the game that always sticks out for me with George Washington. I mean, how did you lose to Richmond? Again, that was, in all honesty, that was Drew McGold's best game of the season. He scored 27 in that loss to the Richmond Spiders. But again, he was the only guy who showed up that night. And again, George Washington has just been a very mixed bag of results since that loss and since that game we took them to go to Richmond and beat the Spiders, who are not all that great either. So I'm going to take the Loyola Chicago Ramblers. They're playing with all the momentum in the world right now, trying to ramp up for the A10 tourney. There are only 4 more games in the A10 for Loyola Chicago. George Washington's only got 3. But again, we're coming down the stretch here in the A10 tourney. Teams are jockeying for a position, and we're going to take the Loyola Chicago Ramblers to win at home and cover the 3.5 points against the George Washington Revolutionaries. We move on to our 4th best bet of the video. We get some better games now. I mean, again, not a marquee matchup in the Big Ten. I did consider putting Kentucky and Oklahoma on this video, but Oklahoma's coming off their first one in a while, and then Kentucky has to go to Norman to play that game, so I stayed away. Instead, we're going to this spot. Also, I don't mind St. John's on the road, -7.5 against Butler. I think that's a decent spot. Anyways, we're going to Los Angeles, California, for the USC Trojans and the Ohio State Buckeyes. Give me USC at home. I get it, both these teams have been struggling a lot, right? These are 2 squads that should be good for the Big Ten tourney, even though, again, USC, I think they could still lose out and get in, but they likely need one more win to clinch their spot in the Big Ten tournament. Again, the bottom 3 teams in the conference don't get in to the Big Ten tourney. Right now, after Minnesota's loss yesterday to Northwestern, the bottom 3 are Washington, Penn State, and yeah, Minnesota has fallen back into that bottom 3 with Northwestern again getting the victory over them. Now, if USC loses, though, they join that, currently 3-way tie for the last couple spots in the Big Ten tourney, again, with Iowa, Northwestern, and Minnesota. Ohio State is in, I think, with their 7 wins, but USC does probably need one more win to officially get in the tourney. Now, they do host Washington in a couple games. They should be fine. But still, a huge game and a big spot, again, for SC to finally get back in the win column, because this team has lost 5 of 6. Again, I did say at the beginning of the video, we're not talking about the best basketball today, but USC, again, losing 5 out their last 6, with the only victory being a home spot to Penn State. Okay? In this 6-game stretch, they played 2 home games. And again, going on the road for a team like USC, and same can be said about UCLA, UW, and Oregon, it's difficult because of the travel, obviously, because you're going for the most part to the Midwest, and hell, even on the East Coast, if you're playing a team like USC did when they had to go all the way to Maryland and Rutgers, right? It's tough for this team to go all the way out east and play. They're coming back home, and again, now it's Ohio State going from Columbus to Los Angeles. So again, we talk about this 6-game bad stretch for USC. Don't forget, before this bad stretch, they did beat Michigan State at home, but they go to Northwestern, lose by 2. They go to West Lafayette, they get slaughtered by Purdue. They beat Penn State at home, they lose to Minnesota in that game where Dawson Garcia and the guys stormed back at the very end, and we thought Minnesota was playing with some momentum, but then they returned to Minneapolis and they completely laid an egg, or laid back-to-back eggs in back-to-back games against Penn State and Northwestern. I thought they were going to sweep that, and they lost both. Minnesota Golden Gophers basketball. We finally came around on that squad, and look what happened. Anyways, USC then again goes out east. They play Maryland, they lose. They play Rutgers and lose. But I don't think we should put too much into this losing skid. I don't think so. Because again, when this team's at home, they're much better, and they played some pretty tough teams on the road. They did. They were competitive with the team they should have been competitive with in Northwestern. That's fine. Lose to Purdue, lose to Maryland, lose to Rutgers. All right. I'm not too concerned about that. Desmond Claude obviously leads the scoring. Wesley Yates, those guys averaging 16 and 13 respectfully. It's not a bad USC team. Obviously, they're not elite in the Big Ten. I think they're right on par with Ohio State, an Ohio State team who has been struggling as well. They've lost 4 out of 5 going into this one, dating back to their road loss to Nebraska. Again, prior to this skid, they did pick up a really big win over Maryland at home, but again, they lose to Nebraska on the road. They beat Washington, obviously, at home. 3 straight losses going into this one, a tough game and a tough L in Columbus against the Michigan Wolverines, and then back-to-back losses against Northwestern and UCLA. The Northwestern game, one of the most just disgusting and embarrassing performances I've seen all season out of a college basketball team. Ohio State puts up 49 points at home, losing to Northwestern. And then they were competitive with UCLA, but the Bruins eventually, again, the Bruins were always kind of up by that 8-point margin the entire game, and the Bruins ended up winning that game by 8 and covering the spread in that one. Again, tough spot for Ohio State going to UCLA and playing. The Bruins are good. They are, right? They've stayed in Los Angeles now, obviously, to take on USC, and I think they're going to get swept in the LA road trip. I think they're going to. Again, the Buckeyes have players. Bruce Thornton has been their leading scorer for most of the year. Devin Royal has struggled recently, big time. I mean, honestly, Royal had that big game against Michigan, and other than that, he's been bad in this 5-game stretch. 2 points against Nebraska, 8 points against UW, again 26 against Michigan, but then comes right back down to earth, doesn't hit a field goal in the Northwestern game, scores 4 points. Everyone struggled that game, sure, but then 6 points in 35 minutes against UCLA. I mean, again, if Ohio State wants to be competitive, Devin Royal needs to play better. He needs, again, he needs to finish more in the paint, obviously. Yes, the guy, again, he can obviously drive to the rim and slam it, but shooting 27% from beyond the arc is not the best shooter. They need Royal to really get it going driving wise, and he hasn't really been all that, obviously, recently. Bruce Thornton, again, is going to be their most consistent guy for the most part. Micah Parrish hasn't been bad either in spots. But I think USC does get him here. Again, the way Ohio State's been playing, they're on the road. USC gets to return home. And I'm not putting as much into this bad stretch USC has had that I think most people are. Again, the Trojans are the slight favorite in this game, and that's fine. We're going to take it. Minus 125 for USC. I don't even play the spread. Just take the money line. I'm cool with USC winning this game at home. Ohio State's got to play a late night spot. The game starts at 10:30 Columbus time for this one. I think Ohio State just wants to go home at this point. Give me USC to win this game in the late night spot over Ohio State. But we're not done because we have another late night spot, and it comes in the Atlantic Coast Conference, ACC After Dark, with two historically great ACC schools, California and Southern Methodist. Yeah, nothing screams ACC more than a team from Texas on the Gulf of America versus California. Nice. Give me SMU. Give me SMU. I'm cool with this. I think SMU dominates California. I really think they do. Cal's been ice cold. At one point in time, I was coming around on Cal. They had won 3 in a row. They go to Raleigh, beat NC State. They had that huge win over Florida where the Seminoles screwed us. And they had a high-scoring win over Miami. But then they go to SMU, they lose. They lost to Syracuse at home. They beat NC State, so they swept them this year. But then again, 3 straight losses going into this one. I didn't think they were going to beat Duke. I didn't think they were going to beat Wake. 4 straight losses. But I didn't think they were going to beat Wake, Duke, or Georgia Tech. But then they lose to Stanford on the road. Again, that game was close. Cal was winning it for most of it. But then obviously Stanford came storming back at the end. Stanford was winning most of the game. Cal came storming back. But then Stanford again just held them off at the end. That's a damaging loss, man. It's a deflating loss. You're playing your rivals. You lose to them for the second time this season. You almost come back in the end, but Stanford, again, I think the closest Cal got was down 2 on Saturday night. And again, Stanford just pulled away in the end. Saturday night, not Sunday, right? Yeah, Saturday night. I think SMU comes in here and dominates. Again, I've said this about SMU a lot this season. Are they the team we think they are? Or at least the team that, I don't want to say, not the team that we think they are, but the team that they're kind of being hyped up to be. Again, being currently now the 4th best team in the ACC. They're 11-5 in the conference, 20-7 as a whole, right? We picked them last week to beat Notre Dame, and that went fairly well for us. Obviously, they dominated that game. They were winning the entire ball game against the Fighting Irish. But this game means a lot to SMU. Yes, they're coming off a loss to Clemson the other night, but that was expected. Right now on ESPN's Bracketology, SMU is part of the first 4 out, right? I'll just read off the last 4 in the first 4 out right now. The last 4 in are Nebraska, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Wake Forest. The first 4 out are UNC, Indiana, SMU, Xavier. Indiana has a huge game against Penn State today. I think they win. Do they cover? I don't know. But actually, I'm low-key getting excited for the Hoosiers potentially to make the tournament. That'd be kind of cool. Anyways, because if they get to play in Dayton, they did it a couple of years ago. Dayton's 2 hours away from Bloomington. I can get excited for that. Anyways, SMU needs to win. They absolutely need to win. Because you look at what SMU needs to do down the stretch here. Again, they need to make up some, they need to put in some work, right? They get Stanford on Saturday. That's going to be a huge game for them. Again, Stanford's not a bad team, but easily SMU can run the table here. Cal, Stanford, Syracuse, Florida. Sure, 3 of those games are away from Dallas or Fort Worth, wherever the hell I think SMU's by Dallas. But still, they should be able to sweep this. The Stanford game's probably their toughest outing, maybe FSU. But if SMU can sweep here, they should be in the tourney. I think they should. We'll see. Again, there's a lot to play for, obviously. We'll see how Nebraska fares down the stretch. We'll see how Arkansas plays, obviously, with this SEC conference tourney and conference play, wrapping up. Southern Methodist can, do some work here and make up some work, obviously, and get into the tourney. So this is a huge game for them, and I think they win it. I think they dominate California. Guys, Cal's got nothing to play for. They're playing for that conference tourney where they're going to have to play in the first round of the ACC tourney, and they're going nowhere. Southern Methodist is playing for their season right now. Cal's right now being led by Jeremiah Wilkinson. He's their second leading scorer on the season, but Wilkinson's been the guy recently. Stojakovic, off and on, but, Andrei Stojakovic is a good player. For Southern Methodist, right, a mixed bag of who you're going to get as the leading scorer. I mean, you get Chuck Harris, who's been scoring a lot recently. Their center, Samet, I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name. He's averaging 10. Boopy Miller, obviously, he scores 13 a night. He's been solid all year long. Matt Cross. I mean, they've got a bunch of guys who can score for SMU. Miller's been out since the Pitt game. I don't think he's playing tonight, but again, they've found production outside of Miller with, again, Harris and Cross. I think they're going to be okay. I'm going to take Southern Methodist to dominate here, and really the main factor for this game is, sure, again, Cal's kind of been sucking recently, but also you got to think of motivation here. SMU's trying to fight their way into the tournament right now. California, they've known they've been out for a while unless they can pull an NC State and potentially win the ACC tournament, which Cal does not have the Cinderella magic that NC State had last year, so it's not going to happen. So again, that's the main part of this pick, and I like SMU on the road, -3.5. I wouldn't be surprised if that ends, again, maybe potentially 2.5. That keeps swinging back and forth. I think it just swung to 2.5 as I'm recording this, 3.5. As I'm recording this is at about 2 in the morning. I like SMU a lot in this spot. -3.5. I think they cover easy. I think they dominate California. California, again, that's a demoralizing loss they just took against Stanford. So I'm going to take the Southern Methodist Mustangs to go on the road and dominate in Berkeley. Give me the SMU Mustangs to close the night. Yes, it's a late night spot, but at 8 p.m. I like SMU to go to Berkeley and beat Cal. So folks, that'll do it for our 5 best bets for college basketball here on February 26th. If you haven't yet though, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below for more. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy the video, and make sure to comment if you do disagree with any of the picks. We'll be back tomorrow for more college basketball best bets, and of course, we'll have our NBA predictions out later today as well. Folks, thank y'all for watching, and Mamba forever.